Please welcome ECC Board of Directors member Kyle Letnicki.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to share a quick be ready moment. I had a contact just pop out, which is a really awesome thing to happen right before you go on stage trying to read teleprompters. But my wife was ready, so thank you, Lee. She had my backpack with a contact, so it's looking clear right now. So, but super excited to be here to cap off a great week. The speakers have been great, but Coach Dungy's gonna close the show for us today. You know, I've been around a lot of coaches in my life, and I really think you can put them in two different buckets, right? So on one side, you've got the gruff, angry coach, right? The guy that's perpetually pissed off, probably spitting in your face. A lot of y'all know that guy, right? The loud, the angry type. This is the guy that was telling me, hey, Kyle, you're really slow, speed up. And hey, Kyle, mix in a salad every now and then, right? So, but Coach Dungy, he's on this side, right? So he's a little bit different, right? He's a man of faith. He's a man of family. His leadership principles revolve around being decent and being kind, while not confusing that kindness with weakness, and still utilizing empathy and respect as pillars of how he's led successful teams, both on and off the field. Coach Dungy retired from the NFL in 2009 after a 31-year NFL career as both a player and a coach. In 13 seasons as head coach of the Indianapolis Colts and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Dungy amassed a 148-79 record and reached the postseason 10 straight times. That's pretty impressive. On February 4th, 2007, Dungy became the first African-American head coach to lead his team to a championship when the Colts defeated the Chicago Bears in Super Bowl 41, beating them 29-17. He's one of only 3 people in the NFL ever to win a Super Bowl as both a player and as a coach. And in 2016, Coach Dungy was selected to join the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Following his coaching career, he transitioned to broadcasting for NBC Sports, authoring multiple best-selling books, as well as continuing his involvement in various organizations such as Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and the Dungy Family Foundation. But of all his accomplishments and accolades, I think my favorite is the fact that he was the last player in NFL history to both throw and catch an interception in the same game in 1978 against my beloved Houston Oilers. With that, help me welcome Coach Dungy to this stage.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kyle, for that introduction. And boy, I have to say, it is great to be here with you. I'm glad that we're able to make it here. I was a little concerned. I live in Tampa, about 3 hours north of here, and all week we're watching the weather, and you know, we've got this hurricane that's approaching, and boy, I hope it doesn't turn too fast and hit those guys down at Marco Island, and they won't be able to have their conference. But then I hope it doesn't go too much farther north and hit us. So I did have your best interest at heart. Fortunately, it went way, way north and went over top of all of us. So, we're able to be here, and that is a blessing, and I am really, really glad to be here. I do have to say, though, it does bring a little bit of pressure. I know this is like the 55th annual event. You guys have had some tremendous speakers over the years, and so I kind of felt that pressure to keep the tradition going and do as well as I could. And then I felt a little bit more pressure when Tara told me I had an hour. I said, really? So you do know that I was a football coach, right? Okay. Football coaches, we're 12-minute halftimes. Okay. We don't have the smartest guys. We can't hold that attention that long. So I'm used to like 6 minutes, 7 minutes. As a matter of fact, Kyle mentioned Houston Oilers, and I have to say, when we've got a bunch of Houstonians here, right? Yes. Two of my biggest moments were courtesy of the Houston Oilers. He mentioned me having an NFL record as being the last person to intercept the pass and throw an interception in the same game. In the Houston Astrodome, 1977, I'm a first-year player. I'd been a quarterback my whole life, and the Steelers switched me to safety. And I made the transition. I'm now playing defense. We're playing in Houston. Dan Pastorini is their quarterback, and in the first quarter, he throws the ball to Ken Burrow, and I knife in front of him and get it, and get my first ever interception. And I'm thinking, boy, this might be a big day for me. The first quarter, I've got one interception already. If this keeps up, I might have 4 by the time the game ends up. Well, shortly after that, one of their big defensive linemen, Elvin Bethea, hits Terry Bradshaw, breaks his wrist, and Bradshaw's out of the game. So we bring our backup quarterback in, and the last play of the third quarter, Elvin hits Mike Kruzek and sacks him and separates his shoulder. I'm on the sideline thinking, wow, what is Coach Noel going to do now? We don't have a quarterback. And I feel this hand on my shoulder, and I look around. He says, you're going to go in. What plays do you know? And I said, well, I know 3 or 4 plays. And so I played the fourth quarter, and I ended up throwing an interception and very disappointed in myself, but did put me in the history books. And so I'm the answer to a trivia question. But the other thing I took, the great moment from Houston, was one of their coaches, Bum Phillips, was a very, very colorful coach and someone that I enjoyed competing against. And I actually used one of his halftime speeches for the biggest halftime moment that I ever had. We were playing the New England Patriots to go to the Super Bowl. And we had lost to them 2 times before in the playoffs. And so now we had them at home in 2006. We feel like that's going to be our day and our time because we got them at home. And we end up falling behind 21-3. And as I mentioned, there's only 12 minutes in halftime, so you got to kind of scramble. Now we're way behind, and everybody's got a suggestion and things that are going on. And everybody wants to talk, and everybody thinks of what we should do. So I let all the assistant coaches talk. Peyton Manning, our quarterback, he talked a little bit. And I'm about ready to talk, and I hear the knock on the door. It's the referee. You've got 1 minute. I said, gee, the biggest game we're ever in. We're behind 21-3. I only have 1 minute left. So I called on Bum Phillips, and I remember a halftime speech he gave. And he said, guys, we're playing terrible. If we don't start playing better fast, we're going to lose. So I told that to our team. We went out there and had the greatest comeback in the AFC Championship game history. We won 38-34, and I credited Bum Phillips, gave him all the credit for that. So those are my 2 fond memories of Houston, for sure. But I'm here today, we're talking about leadership a little bit. I know your kind of theme this year is lead and launch, and we really want to talk about that. What does that mean? What does it mean to lead a group? What does it mean to launch? And I have some different feelings on leadership than a lot of people do. Kyle kind of mentioned it. Leadership is, I think, really a misunderstood concept in our society today. We had 8 years of Democratic leadership under President Obama, and the Republicans complained, hey, we're not doing this right. And then we have 4 years of Republican leadership, and the Democrats complain, and kind of that's where we are. How do we do this? How do we run things? How do we lead in the right way? It's the same thing in the sports world. In the National Football League, we've had conversations about leadership and what does that look like. A couple of years ago, Brian Flores was the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. He got released and he filed a lawsuit and, asking the question, how can a sport that is 70% African American and probably 45% coaching and support staff and only 3% African American head coaches, is that really reflecting leadership? And we just seem to have a lot of confusion today about what leadership is and how to lead effectively. And I do have my own ideas on that, but in the interest of full disclosure, I have to admit that I got most of my beliefs on leadership from three sources. Number one, from my parents, who were teachers, but they were great leaders in our home and in our community. I played for several different football coaches who gave me an idea of what leadership was all about. And then I also believe that there's great lessons on leadership in the Bible, and I happen to really put a lot of weight on that, and I think that's the ultimate resource in terms of leadership. But I think in this day and age, I think some of our problems go back to not really following what the Lord says about leaderships and how to lead in the right way. And just to show you how far off base we are, I want to use a football example. And I hope I don't bore you people that aren't football fans, but I do think that we can take some examples from that sport into life. And I'm going to hopefully use some of those examples and explain it to you to get the larger point. But I know we've got a lot of Cowboys fans here. I know we've got some Texans fans and Saints fans in this oil industry. But I'm going to talk about a guy by the name of Doug Peterson. How many people know that name, Doug Peterson? If you're a football fan, you might know him. If you're a serious football fan, you might know that he was hired last year by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Doug was hired to replace a guy by the name of Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer was a legend in this state of Florida and came to the Jaguars with a tremendous resume, but he only lasted 13 games, actually, and they only won 2 of the games that he coached. And Doug Peterson came in, they hired him. He turned things around and took the Jags to the playoffs in just his first season. And if you're a real serious football fan, you know that story. If you're a casual fan, you might say, gosh, Doug Peterson, I've heard that name before. Where do I know that name? Well, Doug Peterson, 5 years ago, was the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles and led them to a Super Bowl victory over the New England Patriots. And because he had this Super Bowl resume, when he got hired by Jacksonville, the football pundits kind of gave that good reviews, but that was actually not the case when Doug was hired by the Eagles. I want you to actually listen. I'm going to quote someone who had this to say about Doug Peterson when he was first hired by the Philadelphia Eagles in 2015. This is a quote. This guy says, Doug Peterson might be less qualified to coach the team than anyone I've seen in my 30-plus years in the NFL. That was before his first season. Then after his first season, beginning his second season, this man went on to make this statement. He said, everyone knows Peterson isn't a head coach. He might be less qualified than anyone I have ever seen. When will the Eagles admit their mistake? They're going to throw away the 2017 season by stubbornly sticking to the Peterson principle. That was kind of harsh, but in November of that year, the Eagles were in first place in their division. They had the best record in football, and now they asked this guy to comment a little farther. And what do you think now? And he said, well, I'll make a decision at the end of the year when this is all over. I have the feeling we'll see everything come out. It could be a mistake. It might not be a mistake. We'll see what happens when it plays out. Well, that following January, the Eagles were headed to the Super Bowl. They asked this guy again. He said, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I went a little too far. Maybe Doug Peterson is okay after all. You see, this person couldn't embrace Doug Peterson as a great coach, as a great leader, even as he was leading his team to the Super Bowl. Well, it'd be one thing if this were just some irate Cowboys fan, commenting on the Philadelphia Eagles coach, but that wasn't the case. You know who made these quotes? A gentleman by the name of Mike Lombardi. Mike Lombardi was a former general manager in the NFL. In fact, he worked for the Philadelphia Eagles. Part of his job when he was the general manager was to select head coaches. So how could somebody who's trained for 30 plus years to hire coaches, how could he be so wrong about this? Well, part of it was that Doug Peterson didn't have maybe the credentials that everyone had. He was a high school coach at a small Christian school in Shreveport, Louisiana. He wasn't fiery, he wasn't outgoing. He didn't have the apparent tough edge, rough edge that most people think you need for that job. And hardcore football people kind of agreed with Mike Lombardi. But 2 years after becoming head coach of the Eagles, there he was on the podium holding the Lombardi Trophy and a victorious team in Super Bowl 52. So the question becomes, how does that happen? How can we kind of misplace our thoughts and be so far off? And the answer is that Doug Peterson just doesn't fit the mold of the so-called leader that we see in America. And that ought to tell us that maybe there's a little something wrong with the mold. Since I won the Super Bowl with the Indianapolis Colts in 2006, I've been asked to speak at a lot of events like this and talk about leadership. I've actually written 2 books about it, one called Uncommon and one called The Mentor Leader. Originally, I had a thought that I'd only speak about 5 minutes and then you'd have to read the books and buy them. But since I have an hour, I can tell you a little bit about what's in there and what being a great leader looks like. But unfortunately, I think for many people in football and many people in a lot of areas of our country, the mold of what a leader is supposed to look like could probably be epitomized by a 1960s television show called Rawhide. And we probably don't have many people old enough to remember Rawhide in this room. Few people. Some people maybe remember it and don't want to admit it, but for you young people in the audience, I'll give you a little overview. Rawhide was a weekly show about the Wild Wild West, and a young actor by the name of Clint Eastwood actually got his start in Rawhide. I grew up in Michigan and was on Friday nights there. And the plot of Rawhide was very, very simple. There was these group of guys, and they were charged with driving cattle from somewhere in Texas, I'm not sure exactly where, but to Dodge City, Kansas. And the trail boss was a man named Gil Favor. Mr. Favor was the leader. He ran the show, he made all the decisions, he told everyone what to do. The men, they got behind the cattle, they had their whips, their cattle prods, they were on their horses, and they drove these cows to Dodge City every week. Come hell or high water, they were going to get the cows to Dodge City. And if there are any disagreements, any problems along the way, Mr. Favor and young Clint Eastwood, they would yell loud enough, they'd shoot enough guns to get everybody on track and get everybody to Dodge. Well, I grew up watching that, but unfortunately, I think so many men in my generation ended up watching that and thinking that is how you lead. That's how you lead your business. That's how you lead your family. That's how you lead in your marriage. And unfortunately, that is not the best way to lead. Fortunately for me, that's not how my parents modeled leadership. It's not how the Bible portrayed leadership. In fact, the Wild Wild West cattle drive is actually the polar opposite to the Middle Eastern shepherd that David talked about in Psalm 23. You read the 23rd Psalm, you see that the shepherd doesn't do it the rawhide way. The shepherd, in fact, does it just the opposite. The shepherd that David talked about did nothing but spend time with the sheep, get to know them from the day the sheep were born. That shepherd is around them, looking after them, caring for them, feeding them, taking care of them, rescuing them if they get lost or separated from the flock. In fact, if there was a particularly troublesome sheep that did tend to wander off, the shepherd would do something unusual. The shepherd would break that lamb's leg. And It seemed like it was a punishment, but it wasn't really a punishment. It was done to help that lamb, because with a broken leg, the lamb couldn't wander away. In fact, the lamb couldn't walk at all, so the shepherd would have to take him and put him on his neck and walk around with him and transport him everywhere. And in the process, the lamb got to know that shepherd really, really well. He got to know his voice, and he began to understand that the safest place for him to be was to be close to that shepherd. And that's what David was talking about in Psalm 23. That's the picture he was painting. In fact, in the time that David grew up and when he was a shepherd, at night they would come into these great, large holding pens, and they'd all it was a communal place, and you might have 10 or 12 shepherds with a bunch of different flocks there. And the question would be in the morning, and they're ready to leave, how do I know which sheep are mine and which are someone else's flock, and how do I get my sheep out of there? Well, what they would do, the shepherd would have to come out without touching any of the sheep, come out, and then he would call them. And the sheep that would come, that's the ones that he could take. So that shepherd better know his sheep very well. He better have a great relationship with them, and they better follow his voice, because they know that's the best thing to do. And that's how it was done. And that is really, I think, the crux and the really important part of leadership is those relationships, building those relationships. Well, I had the privilege, when I was working for NBC, we actually broadcast that Super Bowl that the Philadelphia Eagles won. And part of my job was to go to Philadelphia a week before the game and do some stories on their players that we could use on our pregame show. And I interviewed a bunch of people in Philadelphia that year, and to a man, that's how the Eagles players described Doug Peterson. Oh, we follow him. They followed him because they wanted to. They believed in him. They knew that he had their back, and he cultivated those relationships so they knew that they could trust him. We actually broadcast Jacksonville's playoff game last year for NBC. I called the game, and when I got down there, I heard the same thing. I heard the Jacksonville staff and their players, hey, we love Coach Peterson. He understands us. He relates to us. We know he's got our back. So at halftime, they fell behind. They're 27-0. They're losing to the Los Angeles Chargers. And I told a national TV audience, I said, I know it looks bad, they're not playing great, but I wouldn't count the Jaguars out, and I wouldn't give this victory to the Chargers, because I know these players believe in Doug Peterson. I think they're going to come back the second half and they're going to fight. Jacksonville came back and won the game 31-30. Made me look smart. Okay? I'm not that smart. Okay? I didn't have any special knowledge. I just knew the type of relationship these guys had, and I knew they wouldn't give up. That's Coach Peterson's style of leadership. It's a style that not a lot of people in football are familiar with. Not a lot of people in football think that it can be effective, but it was my leadership style as well. I was blessed to be around some tremendous leaders growing up. I got a picture of that type of leadership, and that's why I wrote those 2 books. I wanted to pass on the lessons that I had learned about a style that was maybe contrary to what a lot of people were saying and what a lot of people thought about. Where did I pick this up? Well, I picked it up growing up to start with. I never thought much about leadership until I got to high school. My high school football coach wanted me to be the quarterback. And as the quarterback, he said I had to be a leader. And that was foreign to me. I really didn't want to hear that. I just wanted to be one of the guys. It's much easier to just be part of the group than to be a decision maker, to be someone that people were going to follow. So I never tried to be the leader. In fact, I never saw myself as a leader until my senior year when I quit the team. You see, I got in a disagreement with my coach, and of course, I was right, because I was 16 at the time, so obviously I knew a lot more than the coach knew. But he didn't see things my way, and so I quit the team. And to my surprise, 11 of my buddies quit too. I'm like, no, why are you guys doing that? You don't need to quit. This is my dispute, and you know, you guys need to not get involved in this. I knew I was going to play some other sports. I knew I was going to go to college. I didn't want those guys to end their careers, their high school careers, the same way I did. But for most of them, that wasn't the issue. Hey, we're with you on this, and if you quit, we're going to quit. And that was the first time it dawned on me that I was a leader and people were going to follow me, whether I did the right thing or the wrong thing. So that was one of the first things I learned about leadership, is that you've got to make sure you're going in the right direction, because as a leader, people are going to follow you. Well, in this case, I wasn't going in the right direction. I had to make an adjustment. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how the story ended in a little bit, but that was a lesson for me. That, boy, you've got to be right when you're leading. Well, as I mentioned, had some great role models growing up, and quickly I want to tell you about 5 men who taught me the most about leadership and the 7 principles I learned from them. And the first one I mentioned was my dad. My dad was really a different kind of leader. He was one of the quietest men I've ever met. Rarely talked. As a matter of fact, he was a teacher, and my brothers and sisters and I said, I wonder what happens in that class, because Dad doesn't say anything, so how do they learn, you know? That was him. He didn't talk, he listened a lot, and that was one of the principles that I got from him. A great leader learns to listen to people. But when my dad talked, he was straight to the point. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He would just tell you what you needed to hear, not what you wanted to hear. And the first principle I got from him was what I termed, you know, what are you going to do to make things better? That was what he'd always say to us whenever I came to him with a problem. Didn't matter what it was. Hey, coach didn't put me in the game today at all. I'm better than so-and-so, and he didn't play me. The teacher gave me a C when I should have gotten an A. You know, I really wrote a good paper, and that was unfair. No, it didn't matter what it was. He'd listen. My dad would just sit there and listen, and he'd say, okay, so what are you going to do to make it better? I'd be like, Dad, no sympathy, no, hey, you know, you might be okay, that was wrong. No, that wasn't him at all. Hey, you want the coach to put you in? Practice harder. Okay. Make sure that he has to put you in, because you're going to give your team the best chance to win. If you didn't get an A on that test, how could you write it better so that they have to honor you with the grade that you want? I'd say sometimes, hey, Dad, that's not fair, or this wasn't fair, that wasn't fair. And he would say, you know, life's not fair. Sometimes they might not want you to fly, you might have to teach yourself. And I got the point. I never really knew what that meant. I knew what he was trying to say, but that was all he would say about it. Found out at his funeral what it really meant. People were getting up talking about my dad. One of his best friends said, hey, Will Dungy did a lot of things, and he was a great friend in this, but one of the things we were most proud of was when he joined the Tuskegee Airmen. And my brothers and sisters, when the guy said that, like, that's what he was talking about. Never knew, never mentioned it, never said he was in the Airmen, but that was it. Hey, we're not going to complain. Air Force is segregated. We got to do what's right. How can we make the situation better? We'll go down to this little place in Tuskegee, and we'll learn how to fly planes. What are you going to do to make the situation better? Second point my dad always made to my siblings and I that I really appreciated later on in life, he'd always say, there's no law that says you have to do what other people are doing. Okay, of course, we never wanted to hear that when we were trying to get something fun going on, or like go to the movies, or hey, Johnny got a car when he was 16. Don't have to do what everybody else is doing. You know? But the bigger point we got was it's not always necessary, it's not always the best to follow the crowd. I grew up in Michigan, a little automotive town, and most of my buddies, that was their desire, that was their dream, that's what they knew. Everybody wanted to go to work for General Motors or Chrysler or Ford, make some good money. That's what we knew. And my dad was, hey, you don't have to do that. If that's what you want to do, great, but don't do it just because everybody else is doing it. And I had some really good friends. I had one talented teammate in high school who was way more talented than I was, but when he turned 18 in the middle of our senior year, he quit the team and went to work for General Motors because that's what he wanted to do. And I think, boy, if I just followed the crowd, if I did what everybody else did, that could have been me, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I would not have seen many of the things that I was able to see. I wouldn't have had many of the experiences, and I thank my dad often now for drilling that into us. Do what you feel is the best thing to do. Don't do what everybody else does because they're the crowd. If you want to do something different, you lead a different way and get the crowd to follow you. Well, after I learned those couple of points from my dad, that leaders make things better and leaders aren't afraid to do things in a different way to get it done, I learned a third principle of leadership from my high school coach that I had the disagreement with, Dave Driscoll. He ended up being one of my biggest supporters and one of the best influences in my life. And one of the first things he told me when I was that young sophomore quarterback is this, and I still have this written down on a little card that he gave me. Talent is God-given, be thankful. Praise is man-given, be humble. Conceit is self-given, be careful. I was 14 when he told me that, and he knew if I developed into a good player, I'd get some notoriety. I'd have to learn to keep it in perspective and to understand that God was really the one that was ultimately responsible for my success. So, third principle of leadership I learned from Coach Driscoll is that leaders have humility. And most of the best leaders that I've been around and been involved with had that. Mentioned Doug Peterson, he's got humility to a T. Many of the great coaches that I played for, that came through loud and clear. Well, then I went to college, played for a guy by the name of Cal Stahl at the University of Minnesota. Coach Stahl had a saying that he gave to us when I was a freshman there: success is uncommon, therefore not to be enjoyed by the common man. And I wrote that down, obviously, and kept track of that. He went on to tell us that there's a couple of ways you can be uncommon in the sports world, and the same thing is true in life. Number one, you can have a talent that is so great and so rare that no one else has it. Or the second way you can be uncommon is to have a drive and a desire in your heart that propels you to do the things that everybody else could do, but most people won't. And as soon as he said that, I said, well, that's me. If it's just hard work, if it's drive, it's determination, that's what I'm going to be. Outworking people, I can do that. Well, that became part of my mantra, and that's what I learned about leadership as well. The fourth principle: leaders are prepared to work hard. Leaders don't tell you how to do things, they show you, and they do it by example. Played 4 years for Coach Stahl, and then I went to the NFL. Chuck Noll was a tremendous, tremendous coach. He was the best that I've been around. I learned so much from him. I mentioned 2 years as a player there for the Steelers and 8 years on his staff. Coach Noll had a run that nobody else has ever had in the National Football League. 6 years, 4 Super Bowls, never any accolades because he was humble and he had that humility that we talked about. I had the privilege of just learning from him, and he hired me when I was 25 years old to join his coaching staff. I had never coached before, and I was a little bit nervous about it. I accepted the job. But then I asked him, I said, what do you want me to do, Coach? What is my job exactly? What does a coach do? And he told me something that I never forgotten. It became my fifth principle of leadership. He said, your job as a coach on this team is to help your players be better. I'm like, okay, what else? What more? So that's it, in a nutshell. Help your players be better. That's what leaders do. They help their group be the best they can be. Period, end of story. The best leaders are the ones that end up helping their group the most. So that became a characteristic of mine. A leader isn't the person that gets served. The leader isn't the person that everybody holds up on the pedestal. The leader is the person that helps his group the most. You become the leader. The sixth characteristic I learned about great leaders was from the last coach that I worked for. His name was Denny Green, fantastic coach for the Minnesota Vikings, and he actually groomed me the latter part of my assistant coaching career. He felt I was going to be a head coach, worked with me, helped me, poured into me, and even after I got my head coaching job at Tampa and we became competitors, Coach Green was always there to help me. I remember my second year, we became good enough to get on Monday Night Football, and I couldn't remember the schedule that we had used on Monday night. I called Coach Green. I said, Denny, we're playing on Monday night. Can you refresh my memory on how we did that, how we used the extra day, what we did? He sent me the whole schedule, what we used, even though we were competing against each other and we were going to end up playing them later on in the year. He still wanted me to be successful. And that told me something about leadership too, that really great leaders are unselfish. They prepare other people to lead. So we've got these principles of what leadership looks like. Well, what does that mean though in the real world? And if you're trying to lead your organization, your group there, what does it really mean to be a great leader, and how do you do it? Well, I'm going to give you 7 things that leaders do. Again, this is from the book, so you won't have to buy the book. I'm going to spell them out for you right now. 7 E's, we call it. Okay, the first one is engage. Great leader gets to know his people. So you find out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what they need to work on, how they need to learn. More than anything, though, to be able to engage means to build that trust so people know that they can count on you. Greatest example I had in that is Leroy Rockamore. Guy, you've never heard his name, but he was very instrumental in my life. He was my junior high assistant principal. He came when we were in 8th grade. And he was one of those guys who's different than any administrator I've ever been around. Got introduced to us as the new assistant principal. And about 3 or 4 days later at lunch, here he comes walking over, and Mr. Rockmore sits down at our lunch table. Well, you can imagine what would happen now with 13-year-old boys and the assistant principal sitting at the lunch table. We clammed up. All the conversation stopped. Nobody said a word. What is this guy doing? He's obviously trying to catch somebody in something. Why is he here? He starts talking to us about the Detroit Lions and what kind of football season we're going to have and what's going on, this new music group, the Jackson 5. What do you think about them? And then he gets up and goes away. Next day he comes back, sits down, same thing. Like, what is it with this guy? Well, he goes on and on like this for a couple of weeks, and then finally we start to realize he doesn't want to catch anybody in anything. He's just having conversation, and he went from being the assistant principal to just being Mr. Rockamore. And for 2 years, he became a guy that just befriended us, and we could tell he was looking out for us. Well, fast forward now, 4 years later, I get in this disagreement with my high school coach and I quit the team. My dad tries to talk me out of it, but of course I won't listen to my dad. Get this phone call, and it's Mr. Rockmore. I haven't talked to him in 3 years. He said, hey, I need you to come to my house. I need you to come over. Word on the street is you quit the team. I need to talk to you. Because of the relationship that he had built with us, for some reason I said yes. I walked over to his house. and sat down, and he asked me the reasons why I quit, and I said, well, because I think I'm right and I think the coach is wrong. He said, even if you are right, why would you take away something you really want to do and you love to do, and what are you trying to gain by this? And we had a long talk, and he ended up mediating, talking to the coach. Coach let me back on the team, and we ended up having a tremendous year, and several of the guys who quit with me ended up getting college scholarships because they went back as well. Never would have happened if Mr. Rockmore hadn't sat down at that lunch table for the first time. It wasn't his job, it wasn't part of the job description, but he wanted to engage with us, get to know us, and get to really lead in a way that was different from the assistant principals I had known. So that was the number one thing, engaging. Second E, to be a great leader, is to educate your people. Teach them, how to do things. Help them grow. Coach Noel used to have a saying, he'd say, and one of my favorite sayings of all time is that pressure is what you feel when you don't know what to do. Okay? If you know what to do, you won't feel pressure. And so that was his way of telling us as coaches, if our players aren't playing great, if they're worried about the situation, if they're a little tight and they don't perform well, that's our fault in not preparing them. A lot of coaches have great plays, they can give their players the assignments, but they never tell them how to do it. And his thing was, hey, we don't just teach them what to do, teach them how to do it. And if we do that really, really well, then they're going to be very, very confident, they're going to feel good about what they're doing, and they're going to perform better. So educating your people, not just what, but how. The third E is equip. Players can know what to do, they can even know how to do it, but they're not going to be effective if you don't give them the tools that they need. And one of the tools for football players is practice. It's not enough just to have a playbook. It's not enough just to have the technique explained to you, but do you actually develop those skills? And for me, I never apologized for having tough practices because I felt like that was going to prepare us for what we're going to face on Sundays. I really wasn't doing my job if I didn't have those guys in position to do what they were going to do on Sundays. So equipping them to do their job was important. Fourth thing a great leader does is encourage the group. The easiest thing in the world is to correct people. Yeah, mistakes happen, mistakes need to be pointed out, but there's a way that you can correct that can be encouraging. There's a way you can correct that can be discouraging. It's one thing for me to go out and say, Peyton Manning, you were horrible today. Okay, you were awful. If you don't get better and you don't change, you're not going to have a job. Okay? That's a way of correcting, maybe not the best way. I learned over the course of time, it's much better if I said, hey, yeah, you did it this way. You can be better if we do it this way. This is important. This can be helpful. And make those corrections, but make it in a positive way and make it in an encouraging way. The other thing I learned about leadership is we can't forget to tell people when they're doing a good job. So often it is about corrections and it's about helping people improve, but sometimes you have to sit back and let people know when they're doing a good job. I learned that lesson when I was coaching the Bucks. I got there in 1996 and they had had 13 straight losing seasons and they'd had all kinds of criticism. And so for the first year or two, I was really conscious, I've got to encourage my guys. They're getting the newspaper articles telling them how bad they are. The fans are telling them how bad they are. And so even when we were losing games, I would say, okay, yeah, we didn't win, but we did this, this, and this well. We did this better. We're making progress. Well, then we kind of turned the corner. We started winning. And everybody was now telling them how good they were. So I said, I got to pull back a little bit. And I got to make sure they don't get too big-headed. So I would now point out, yeah, we won this game, but we didn't do this right, we didn't do this right, and this could hurt us if we don't get this corrected. So we were in a stretch in 1999. We won 5 games in a row, and I'm just telling them all the things they did wrong. And John Lynch, one of our veteran players, came to see me afterwards. He said, "Coach, have we played a good game in the last month?" And I said, "John, we're playing great." Yeah. So we wouldn't know it. And I thought about that, and I said, boy, my whole demeanor has changed. And yes, I'm wanting us to be the best we can be, but sometimes you got to come back and say, hey guys, I am proud of you, and we are doing great. And it is important to encourage and not discourage. 5th E in that list is empower your people. When you've got good people in place, you've invested in them, you've trained them well, you've got to let them do their job. Even if you could do it yourself, there's nothing more discouraging to someone to get responsibility, to be given the tools to do something, but then not have the freedom to do it. And that's something I was very, very conscious of when I was the head coach, making sure that I empowered my staff, that the players knew that those staff members were critical, and the players themselves knew that they were critical, and giving them the freedom to do their jobs. 6th thing is energize. A great leader energizes, not just pep talks, but motivation. Setting goals, looking at goals, encouraging, as we talked about, inspiring, letting them know how important the mission is, number one, letting them know how important they are, and making sure you keep that energy in the building. Coach Noel was great with that. He had a saying, everyone's job is important, but nobody's indispensable. He didn't want the upper echelon guys to think that they were so critical that they didn't take their job seriously. But guys like me, who I was kind of at the bottom of the pecking order in terms of playing and that, your job is still important. We need you. Everybody's got to function well for us to be successful. And he had me coming in to work every day, practicing hard, because I felt like just my little bit that I was adding to the team was important to get us to win. 7th thing is to elevate. Make sure you're promoting your people, helping them progress, helping them achieve their goals. One of the things I did when I got to Tampa, I created a position called assistant head coach. A lot of people have it, but I really wanted to make sure that the staff people on my staff who were doing well got recognized, and they got to do press conferences, they got to run different segments of practice and that, and it was important. Herm Edwards became my first assistant head coach, and that helped him get the New York Jets job. And I think one of the things that I'm really, really proud of over my 13 years as a head coach, yes, we won a Super Bowl and we had some great one-loss records, but 6 of my assistant coaches ended up going on to become head coaches. 5 of those men took teams to the playoffs, and 3 of them, Mike Tomlin, Lovie Smith, and Jim Caldwell, took teams to the Super Bowl. So just giving those guys opportunities and elevating them, I think is really, really important for leaders. So those are 7 things I said that leaders do. I told you there were 7 principles of leadership earlier, and I only gave you 6 of them. It's because I left off the most important one for the end of my talk. And the 7th principle that I learned about great leadership is this, that leaders must have the right priorities. My mother's favorite verse in the Bible is Matthew 16:26, which says, "What would it profit a man if he gains the whole world but forfeits his soul?" And unfortunately, in the National Football League, I've seen that happen. I've seen people accomplish a great deal, but give up a lot to do that. I've seen coaches sleeping in their offices, not come home on Tuesday and Wednesday because they thought that their job was so important. Well, that's great, but it really sends the wrong message. And as I say, I was blessed. Coach Noel told us in the very first meeting that you cannot put your whole life into football. It's your profession. Yes, it's very important. Yes, we want to win. But if you make football your whole life, you're going to end up leaving football, which was our job. You're going to leave your job disappointed. So I think I got things in the right priority, and I think that's really, really important. Well, as I said, I learned these 7 principles from my parents through my job in football, but I do think that they apply to all aspects and all walks of life. So as you're preparing for 2024 and you're looking to lead and launch and leverage, hope this gives you some things to think about and how to do it. But I know Kyle and I are going to have a question and answer session. I'd love to really engage on some of the things that you would ask, some of the things that you would want to know about leadership and leading and launching and leveraging.
Great. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it. Yeah, we've got the app going, so if y'all want to fire some questions up, we've already got quite a few on fantasy football tips.
Fantasy football tips.
Come in. So, if you got any sleeper picks.
My biggest tip would be don't bet too much money on it.
Yeah. So first one, I'll start with the one I had in dealing with adversity as a leader. You've dealt with adversity in your personal life as well as when you were asked to not come back as the coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2002. Talk about, as a leader, how you overcame that and dealt with that adversity.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about sports and football, it teaches you that things don't always go perfectly. You are going to have penalties, you're going to have fumbles, you're going to have interceptions, you're going to have bad calls, you're going to have things that you just have to overcome. And a setback is not the end of the world. You don't win every game. Every play is not perfect. So, yes, that's what you strive for, that's your goal, but knowing that you can overcome things. And I think that's really, really important in life. Adversity, you can handle one of 2 ways. And again, I took it from my dad. You can complain about it, you can worry about it, you can let it get the best of you, or you can say, what am I going to do to make it better? What can I do from this point on to go forward? And yeah, one of the toughest moments in my career was after I'd come to Tampa and we had 13 straight losing seasons, and our ownership said if we could just get competitive, if we could just get where people are coming to the stadium again, we'd be happy. Well, we ended up going to the playoffs 4 years in a row, but we didn't win the Super Bowl. And so, hey, we don't think you're the person to take us to that next step. We're going to go in a different direction. And I just looked at it as, okay, this is an opportunity to really let people know what I'm talking about. We can't let adversity stop you, and to continue to go forward. So I think look at adversity as a challenge, but not as an end of the road.
Well, you did win the Super Bowl. Gruden won it next year. So did he, give you any checks for that for that team?
No, I didn't get a check, but they were very, very complimentary, and I appreciated them. It was tough. It was tough to watch them win the very next year because I felt like I could have been there and been part of it. But I was appreciative. I still make my home in Tampa, and it was a great place for me, even though didn't quite make it all the way to the promised land.
Yeah. One question that came in, I think is a good question. When you got to Tampa, what were the toughest things to overcome to change that losing culture, that culture that had maybe gotten used to winning 5 games every year?
That was absolutely the toughest thing, the mentality of, we can't win anyway, it doesn't really matter, it doesn't matter what we do, we're not going to win. So getting rid of that complacency. One of the first things I did, I called every veteran player on the team. And I said, I'm your new coach. I want you to come in and see me. I want to introduce myself. But I also want you guys to tell me why you don't think we're winning and what we can do, what changes we have to make. Well, most players came in, introduced themselves, and they had 1 or 2 things. They said, I don't like this, I don't like that. Hardy Nickerson was our defensive captain that year, and he came in. He had played for me in Pittsburgh, so I knew him. I didn't have to introduce myself to him, but he said, you asked what I think we need to do, and he rolled out 7 legal pads of things. Here's problems that we have, and some of them were complex, some of them were simple, but really trying to get from them and their perspective, of what we needed to do to change. And obviously we didn't do everything that everyone suggested, but just for them to know that I was conscious of it and that I cared what they thought, and I wanted to hear from them, that really helped us. I made a couple suggestions right away. We cut out a lot of the frills. The golf carts in training camp, there was no golf carts. They had to walk everywhere, and I showed them I didn't use a golf cart. I didn't let anybody drive me. I walked every place in training camp, so they couldn't use that as an excuse. But changing that mindset was really, really important.
So when we were talking earlier backstage, we talked a little bit about NIL and the portal and things in collegiate athletes that are very different today than they were, maybe when you were involved in the game. Talk about coaching athletes today versus maybe when you were coaching, and there's a lot more distractions, it seems like. Maybe speak to, do these leadership principles, is there any tweaks to make versus, today versus maybe a few years back?
Yeah, people ask me that all the time. You're coaching, if you were coaching now, it would be so much different. What would you do differently? What would be the problems? And I think there are some things that are different. Social media, I would never have dealt with a player who had his own website before. But I think some things just stay the same. And players want to be coached, they want to win, they want to know how to pull together. But I do think that engagement piece, engaging people and finding out what's on their plate, that's really, really important. And I think I would have had the same kind of MO, may have done some things differently, but I would really still get to know my players, what makes them tick, what do they need to help them be the best they can be. So I think it's just a little more engagement and finding out what they're really all about.
So another question, in your book, Quiet Strength, you wrote about retiring early at age 53. That's pretty unique in the coaching world unless you're asked to leave. And so maybe talk about what led to that decision and the impact it had on your life.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Coach Knowles said, you cannot make football your whole life. And Art Rooney Sr. was our owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, great man, and he talked about being part of the community. And as a rookie player in Pittsburgh, on your day off, you had to do some community service work. They'd have a list of things, places you could go, but he said, we want you to get involved. We want you to be part of this. So I learned pretty early on that there was more to life than just football, and there were things that I wanted to do. So when I was 53, I'd coached 28 years at that point, and I had some things that I wanted to do a little bit more. I wanted to get more involved with some things, Family First, an all-pro dad in Tampa, ministry called A. Brown Ministries that was an outreach to inmates and people trying to convert back into society. So I had these things that I wanted to do that maybe football wasn't allowing me the time to do. So in my case, it was not retiring from something and just saying, well, I'm done with football, but I just had more things that I wanted to try to do, and I've been retired 14 years now, and it has been fun, and I have been able to engage more. I don't miss football. I'm still involved on the weekends as a broadcaster, but I don't miss the day-to-day because I am involved in other things in the community. So I think that was the key for me, having things that I wanted to go to.
Doug, a serious one here. Tom Brady or Peyton Manning?
Tom Brady's won 7 Super Bowls, but Peyton Manning won 1 Super Bowl for me. So, so I'd have to say Manning.
Well, staying on Peyton, maybe share one of your favorite Peyton stories. If you
Well,
could.
I've got 2 classic Peyton Manning stories that I usually tell in this type of situation. People ask me about Peyton and what makes him great, and he's the most driven athlete I've ever been around. We had this tradition that started in Pittsburgh, Family Saturday. Our Saturday practice involved all the kids. You could bring your kids, bring them out on the field. Coach Noel wanted them to know where their dads worked. We won a bunch of Super Bowls that way. So I got to Tampa, I put in Family Saturday. Our players loved it. We'd have a barbecue after practice and a lot of fun. I get to Indianapolis, we're going to do this family Saturday. I didn't know for the 4 years before I got there, Peyton's Saturday method was he kept track of every play that wasn't perfect on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and he wanted to run those again on Saturday. So he'd come to me and he said, Coach, I kind of understand what you're trying to do about this and with this, but could I make a suggestion? Maybe the kids can come, we can just leave them in the locker room. Do they have to be on the field? See, I was trying to throw 60 basic to Marvin, and he had little Marvin, and he wasn't running fast and wasn't perfect. I think we'd be much better. I'm like, Peyton, some things you're just going to have to live with. This is the way we're going to do it. And so about 3 times a year he'd ask me that. So fast forward now, I've retired. He moves out to Denver, and he's had twins in the process. One of my former players called me and said, you will never guess what Peyton did out here. He told Coach Fox, we need to put in Family Saturday because the kids need to know where their dads work. You know? So I said, I didn't really teach him too much about football, but we did get that poured in. Second story I love to tell about Peyton. My last year coaching, he was 31 years old. He'd already won a Super Bowl. He'd been a 3-time MVP. We drafted a young man from Ohio State named Anthony Gonzalez as a receiver. Because of Ohio State's class schedule, Anthony couldn't be with us in the spring. He was still in school. Well, Peyton, after our practices, twice a week, he would get in his car, drive from Indianapolis 3 hours to Columbus, Ohio, go over the playbook with Anthony for an hour, go out on the field, throw balls for an hour, and then drive back. 8 hours twice a week on his own to help a young receiver be the best he can be. And that's what makes Peyton Manning special.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, well, we'll close with that. Thank you, Coach Dungy, for sharing stories and talking about leadership. And we really appreciate you sharing with us today. So one last round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome to be with you. Lead, launch, and leverage.
There you go.